Hi everyone, just doing a little bit of a live video demonstration for my latest work in progress in this series of distorted and twisted structures here on Cape Cod. This one is the Highland House. Was formerly the Highland House Hotel, and when that shut down many years ago, the Highland House Museum took over, and this is where you can go and now see a lot of wonderful things from the past, memorabilia, and just a whole bunch. So most of the top section of the Highland House, of course this is elongated and warped in the perspective a bit as it comes up this way, and then it has a larger, higher structure. Just trying to add something a bit unique to these Cape Cod dwellings and give them a little bit different personality. So just continuing to work on the sky, and even though I'm using these pastel pencils, I'll bring a few out and show you. These look pretty much like a standard pencil. Different colors. Most of this is blues and grays. A couple of browns will be in it. Still have to do the bottom half. And working on the sky, and that's got mostly blue, but there's some clouding in there. And a lot of times for the sky, I'll block that in with something called pan pastels. And pan pastels come in these little containers here. Almost looks like a makeup container. And they've got these little sponges. I don't know if you can see that. So basically you just, as you can see, you can get it on your fingers pretty easily. This is like a powdery substance. And you just pull a little bit of this up, put it onto this sponge, and just very gently blend that into the sky. And of course you can also add in the pencil as well. I'm just going to secure this down a little bit. You can add in some of this blue. Just angle the camera a little bit further. It's a matter of just, for something like the sky, just adding little circles and just blending. This is really light pressure. You don't need a lot of pressure. And this surface is called pastel matte. It's intended most for pastel pencil. It's got a little bit of a texture to it. It's like a sanded paper. So just adding a little bit of this lightly, and if you put in a little more than you had hoped to, you can just bring in the sponge with some of the pan pastel and just lightly go over that. Takes those pencil lines away. And to add in a little bit more sense of clouds, you can just add in some pastel white. You don't want it to become to look like it's standing out too much. I'm trying to go for just these light, wispy hints of clouds in the background, not the bigger, cumulonimbus clouds that stand out and are very obvious. I don't want the focus of this piece to be the clouds in the sky. I just want it to be a nice backdrop. And again, blending that through. Now, you could go heavier with this, and you could add a little bit more pressure to this white, and that's fine too. I always find that whenever I'm doing illustrations, you set out with a basic idea of what you want to do, and you can modify that. If it takes you off course of what you intended, or you're not able to convey the story or the message you were trying to convey, then that's something you have to stay focused and work on. But, you know, whether the cloud is here or there's no clouds, or the cloud is bigger and stands out, that's all up to how you want to create this scene. And there's really no mistake in that. But I'm just working on the focus of this structure and trying to add in the cedar shingles. They're the old weathered gray cedar shingles that are pretty common that you see here on Cape Cod. And they have an interesting structure. The closer you get to them, they're not really perfectly straight lines. They alter a bit, and they're all unique. So there's going to be some little lines coming in, and it doesn't have to be exact to what the building would have. You just want to give a sense that these are cedar shingles, and they're not perfectly even, not perfectly straight. And when you add these in, if you go a little bit too heavy, you can always come back in. Now this is a dark gray pencil I'm using, Pastel. Here's a lighter gray, and they blend really well. So just to knock some of those dark marks I had just made, you can just bring them back a little bit. And then continue working on some more. And just adding to that unevenness. That is pretty natural for a building like this, and especially with this type of illustration. It's not going to end up being photorealistic. It's not something people would look at and not know if it was an actual photo of a building. There are a lot more details that would need to be added in for that, and a lot more color variations. And I'm just shaking that pastel dust off. It accumulates on this paper and can start smudging down. And it's not good to blow at the paper, so I'm just trying to shake that little bit of dust off. And doing this drawing it's enjoyable for me, and some people really enjoy this type of work. It takes a long time to finish a piece like this, to put the details in, and you can keep going with this for hours. I've seen some pieces from artists where I really enjoy and admire what they've done, and when they get around to talking about how much time they've put into it, with all their details and realism in it, they'll sometimes admit that they put 300 hours, 200 hours into a piece. Of course, those are much larger pieces than this, generally. But mine can vary, can take anywhere from 5 to 10 hours for some of the smaller, less detailed pieces, to 30 to 40 hours for ones that are a bit more intricate and have a lot more detail in them. The more of this detail you keep putting in, the more of this realism you start adding in, the more time it's going to take. There's going to be some trees in the background over on the sides of this building. There's going to be more detail of the door and the windows in the front structure here. And then I'm going to put a sign up on this section, which is going to say Highland House. So I've got to write that in very carefully to make it look like the sign, with a little bit of a shadow underneath it. But I'll put that in after I've got this shingling textured and finished. Then I'll add in the writing on top of it. So it's just building a lot of layers and a lot of patience let me know if you have any questions, or just let me know how you're doing out there. We had a hurricane pretty close to Cape Cod, but it went west of us, so inland and parts of Connecticut, more central Massachusetts, and southern coast Rhode Island, actually all of Rhode Island, is getting hit much harder than we are. We're pretty much central on Cape Cod, and there was a little bit of wind, and there was some rain, not even that much rain. But if you saw the radar, if you've been watching the hurricane, it just looks like it pretty much missed the Cape, but central Mass and Worcester, Northampton, and through the Hartford area, and down where I grew up in Groton, Old Mystic, Connecticut area, where my mom and a couple of siblings still live, the house I grew up. They're getting hit a bit harder down there. And it's not the first hurricane we've experienced. I mean, we're probably not the hot spot for hurricanes, but growing up, I used to, every couple of years, experience these hurricanes moving through, and they were usually never more than like a Category 1, maybe a Category 2, so we don't get hit like some of the southern states. But I'm just adding in here a little bit of variation, and I want to give an indication maybe that even though there's some clouding and there's no real direct sun in the reference I'm looking at, I can create a little bit of a sense of there being more light here coming down, which will mean that this part of the building will see a little bit more sunlight. So just adding a little bit of highlight, and I'll blend it in. And what it'll do is just give a subtle indication of there being a little more light here. And I'm patching these in because these are cedar shingles, as I mentioned before, and they're not a smooth surface. They're not an even surface. They weather differently, and they give that distinct coastal look to a lot of the homes here on Cape Cod, and a lot of houses in general, especially on the East Coast that are near the water. So I'm not sure how this is coming through on the camera. Sometimes you lose a lot of detail in these live feeds, but I think you can see that these little areas of the lighter shingles I'm putting in. This is a pretty random pattern. I'm not looking at a reference and following every shadow and every shingle and every little detail. I'm almost squinting my eyes, looking at a reference and getting a sense of what is making that picture communicate what it is, and how can I emphasize that, how can I modify it, and how can I work to build on what I'm looking at. And what I'm seeing is just, it's a little bit more light hitting this area. It's very subtle, but I'm just emphasizing that a little bit more in my interpretation rather than the photograph I had taken of the building. And I'm just really lightly going over that, just as light as I can touch the pencil to the surface. And there's some dust that's accumulating on here, so just brush that off. shake that off. I'm trying to randomly move here. We tend to work in a pattern that will start looking unnatural. And you'll see that in trees and a lot of things. These cedar shingles are so unique and dispersed differently. So I'm trying really hard not to come up with any pattern that's recognizable. And just as I'm adding these random highlight pieces, I can also come in with this darker gray pencil and bring in, especially over on this side, just a few areas of more dark shading from some of these random shingles that might be a little bit longer than other shingles. They might protrude a little bit, creating a little bit more of a shadow. So we're looking for an unevenness within this structure. I'll just bring this neutral light gray in. Just knock those little dark areas back just a little bit. As little or as much as what seems appropriate for this building. So many areas in this country, in this world, have beautiful landscapes, beautiful, unique buildings to the area. And I'm just taking advantage of what we have here. I'm not going to come up with any wonderful desert scenes or mountains that you might see in the Appalachian or the Rocky Mountains or Smoky Mountains. But we've got a lot of old structures here and things that are unique to Cape Cod. So since I've got that family history and I've got the location, we not only enjoy it, love it here, but I like to capture and incorporate that into what I'm working on. Now just knock these down a little bit. And let me know if you have any questions, and you can write them in and I'll respond afterwards, or if I can see them now, I'll respond and answer any questions I can on the artwork here, or about the weather on Cape Cod or the weather wherever you are. This is a pretty light pencil, but I'm just going to bring in some of this white just to add a little bit more of these highlights, and I'll knock them back down a little bit again. The snoring in the background is our golden doodle, Bondi. And when he gets into a deep sleep, he snores pretty loud. So I'm not sure if that's coming through on the audio part here, but if it is, and you're wondering what does that sound, it's our golden doodle. So these came out, brighter than I'd like, so I'm just going to use this light gray pencil and knock some of them back. And just as I'd like a randomness with the patterns, I want a randomness with the light and dark areas of color I'm putting in, the light and dark values and tones. So if you can see the shadow up here, the shadow is very strong right under the ridge. It's going to be an off-white gray ridge. I'm still working on getting that a little bit more realistic. And then the shadow is really pretty dark right underneath the ridge, and it just blends out a bit into these cedar shingles. And everything that has some light to it, depending on where the light source is going to cast a little shadow. So if the light is a little bit stronger pointing in this direction, which is on my upper right hand corner, I'm just going to subtly indicate that, again, as I'm doing with some of these light colors in these shingles, and I'll add a little bit of these darker ones over here, just giving a little bit of a sense of the light and dark. It won't just be that simple. There won't just be light highlighted shingles here and dark shingles over here, but there will be more darkness on the left half of this than there would be on the right. Very subtle, though. It's not a great example of something where the sun is having an incredible effect on an illustration. It looks like I just need a little bit more highlight over here because I don't want to leave the left side of this out. Trying to work in between some of these pretty subtle lines on the camera, but now just blend that in really lightly. And I blend this in because those marks would they stand out a little too much for what I'm trying to go for. So I want them in there, but I don't want them to be so vivid that they detract from what I'm trying to communicate here. Bring some of this lighter pencil in now. Just for a couple of these highlights, just add that little bit of variety. Variety in pattern, variety of shadow and light, and variety of the amount of light. It's not just one color shadow and one color highlight, just as these shingles have different values as well. And just kicking those back a little bit. Some of them will be more subtle, some will be a little more vivid, and that's the kind of randomness I'm looking for. And up here, there's going to be a couple of highlight areas. And adding that little bit of white. Not much pressure, but just some random marks to help develop that sense of realism of what this actually is. I really want it to look like the old clapboard type cedar shingles that you'd see here on Cape Cod and on this building. I'm not sure when it was shingled last, but the structure's from, I believe, 1902, and it's been modified. The section over just off the camera was added. And the section here, I think, is also a new section. This building goes back quite a ways. There's a good number of rooms in here, which are now part of the museum, but back when my dad was growing up, this was the Highland House Hotel, and it was built by Isaac Morton Small and his wife, Lillian Small, and they were the owners from around 1902 when they had it built until about 1934, 35, when they passed away about a year from each other. And when my dad was really young, he used to go and spend some time in this area. Probably was in this building several times back around the late 19-teens, 1920s and 30s. He was coming to this area quite a bit, and lived in Provincetown for a time, and that's where he met my mom. She grew up in Falmouth, which is another part of Cape Cod, and he had a radio show central to Cape Cod, which is where Paul and I live now. And my dad had a radio show out here, and my mom and her sisters used to listen to it, and they liked singing. They grew up on a farm, and aside from they would do their singing for fun and in their spare time, which they didn't have much of. But my dad invited local talent, so my mom and her sister went, and that's how my mom and dad met. And he was living in Provincetown at the time, so when they married, she moved up to his house in Provincetown on Commercial Street, and they lived there for about 6 months, and then they moved down to Connecticut, which is where my dad was called back into service, into the reserves of the Coast Guard and the sub-base area down in Connecticut, New London and Groton. So they relocated to that area. So I hope to have this finished sometime this week, and we'll be posting a few more progress shots, and of course when it's finished I'll be posting that just about everywhere. I've got an artist page, a personal page, Instagram, Twitter, LinkedIn, MeWe. I think that's it. Thanks for watching, everyone. I'll see you next time.